seen what's happening. We're all well aware of the systemic racism that our Black brothers and sisters in this country are going through. And it's important for us as a community to look within, to look at our own house, and to examine both our hearts, our practices, our families, and make sure we're not practicing or we don't have racism going on within our own community. So, mashallah, we have a panel today, and we're going to be talking exactly about this topic. Racism within the Muslim community. How do we see people of other races? How do we see our Black brothers and sisters? And really look in the mirror, and then take a serious look at ourselves. Allah says He's Subhanahu wa Ta'ala says He's not going to change your situation until you change what's in yourself. So this is a chance for all of us. This is a chance for us to look at ourselves and take an honest look about how we view people of darker skin complexions, how we view our fellow Muslim American, with a Black heritage or Black skin. Like how, it's time for that conversation to happen. And I'm really happy to kick off the conversation today with, starting with the Muslim perspective, Islam's perspective on racism, and Islam's perspective on, how we are all created equal. And to help really launch this conversation, I would like to introduce Dr. Muzammil Siddiqui. I am more than privileged and honored to work with him at the Islamic Society of Orange County in Garden Grove. He is the religious director for ISOC. And Dr. Siddiqui, can you help us start this conversation about what does Islam say about racism and the different races, and how we should view each other and look at each other?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa wala. Thank you very much, Brother Hassan. Thank you, Brother Muhammad Abdul Hafiz, Brother Hussam Alush, Brother Shakil will be joining us, and all the people in the audience. I don't see you, but you see me. But may Allah bless you. Alhamdulillah. So we are, the topic is a white man is not superior to a Black person, or a white person is not superior to a Black person, or a Black person is not superior to a white person. And this is the saying of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the Prophet, the famous saying of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And he mentioned that, he said that in his sermon that he gave in his last pilgrimage in the 10th year of Hijrah. So it is mentioned that he gathered, and there were almost 120,000 of the Sahaba, according to some reports, who were there. And in front of them, he gave, and this was, he also told them that this was his last message, because he said them, I don't think I'm going to see you next year here in this place. And he passed away after a short time. So it was this sermon is a very, very important sermon, and it summarized basic message of Islam. Something that for which he stood, and for 23 years he worked in Mecca and Medina. So he said, ألا لا فضل لعربي على عجمي ولا لعجمي على عربي ولا لأبيض على أسود ولا لأسود على أبيض إلا بالتقوى. Listen, oh people, listen. There is no superiority for an Arab over a non-Arab, or an Arab non-Arab over an Arab, and a Black over a white person over a Black, or Black person over white, except by taqwa. Taqwa means the righteousness, the consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And actually he by using this phrase in this way, he hit on the foundation of racism. Because what is racism? Racism is because we all have races. I mean, everybody is born in some race and has some color. But the Prophet ﷺ emphasized this point, Because racism is to say, I'm afdal, I'm superior than somebody else. I'm superior to this race, to that person, or this color, to this uh, nationality, and all of these things. And that is the problem. I mean, there is no problem with race. I mean, everybody can have a race, and you can love your race. Everybody loves his family, loves his people, loves his country, and this is not against Islam. What is against Islam is that you have this feeling that I am superior and others are inferior. And that is the big problem of racism. So racism, the Prophet ﷺ from the very beginning emphasized that point. The Quran speaks about it a lot. Quran says that all human beings come from the same parent, originally same parent, Adam and Hawa alayhi salam. And this is repeated in the Quran many times. And the purpose of that repeating is so that we understand that we are one big human family. And we relate to each other. We should have a bond for each other. We should care for each other. And the second point that was mentioned is that yes, you have races. جعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم in Surah Al-Hujurat, Surah number 49. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we made you races, branches, people, whatever the word we translate the word sha'ub, and tribes, so that you may know each other. Know each other, that means you know which background a person becomes, what is the father's name, what is mother's name, what are the family background, all of this. This is how we introduce ourselves, and this is how we learn from others. So this is ta'aruf. But this does not mean that you are superior than the other person, because inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The noblest of you, the best of you in the sight of Allah is the one who is the most pious, most righteous, most God conscious. That is the big explanation of the word taqwa. So I'm not going to go there, but that is what is emphasized here. So taqwa is the criteria of nobility, and that is something based on your actions. So you are not good or bad what you are, but you are good or bad what you do. Because what you are, white or black, Arab or non-Arab or whatever race, that's not your choice. There's nothing to do with you. Nobody consulted you where you want going to be born, in what country, in what place. So that's not your, this is Allah's choice. And but as far as your action, that is you are responsible for that. And that makes you a good person or a bad person. So whenever the Quran talks about, it talks about that all human beings are honored by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. Children of Adam are honored, and every person is honored by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, male or female, every person is honored. But at the same time, emphasis is that seek knowledge. هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Those who have knowledge, are they equal to those who do not have knowledge? So it means that you have to have knowledge. The Prophet ﷺ, whenever he asked, Man afdalun nas ya Rasulullah? Man khairun nas ya Rasulullah? Who is the best person? The Prophet says, Saduqul lisan wa makhmumul qalb. A person is the best person, the people are the best people, those who speak the truth, and those whose hearts are clean. Makhmumul qalb. So Sahaba asked the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, we know Saduqul lisan, we know a person speaks the truth, but what is this heart is clean? What does it mean? So the Prophet said, At-taqiyyu naqi, la ghilla fihi, wa la hasad, wa la... then the Prophet explained that in the hadith, that person is the one who has clean, pure, pious, who does not have any deceit, any conceit, and who has no jealousy, and who does not deceive, and who does not... Oh, these are the qualities that you mentioned. So qualities are important. And people have to have, those who have good qualities, they don't brag. They have become humble. So humbleness is very important. Emphasize that. Because indallah, in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not in your own sight. Not a person may think of himself that I am very good, but he may not be. So it is important that once we say that I am doing this for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, may Allah accept that. That's why the most pious people, they are the most humble people. And this is part of the righteousness. So it is, racism is an evil. Racism is a sin. Racism creates injustice in the society, because once people start thinking about themselves, I'm better than the other person, then they discriminate, then they abuse the other people. And there are two kind of, there are some people who are covert racist and some people are overt racist. Some people, they say it, they declare openly. They say, our race is superior race. Our people are the superior people. And other people, they mention the names and they say they are inferior. So these are the people, and then there are some who hide in their hearts. They don't say it, but this is the behavior is that way. And the racism is two kinds. One is the individual, and the other is structural, and they call it this is a system. So that is the racism that is very harmful, and both of them are bad. So if a person has, as an individual, racism, that means he thinks that I am better and he mistreats the other people because of their races, because of their colors, because of their background, then he or she must repent. He must stop doing that and recognize that he was committing a sin. And this is not acceptable. This is kibr. This is arrogance. And arrogance is not acceptable. A person who has even a small, very, very small, tiny bit of arrogance will not go to Jannah. This is something very horrible, something that has to be rejected completely. And the other is this is the structural racism. And this structural racism is the one that is based on the policies, on the way that some people have, because in their jobs, the discrimination in jobs, the last to hire and first to fire, and the salaries that they are given to them, and also discrimination in terms of housing, segregation. In some areas they can live, in other areas they cannot live. Also schools, higher education, discrimination on that. The discrimination basis of, especially in the criminal justice area. That's what we saw about 2 weeks ago. That is, a person was killed, and in a very brutal way is killed, because one person has one race and another has another race. So this is the kind of evil that come, and that's why Islam emphasized this point, that understand you are all human beings and you all belong to one family, and that is the family of Adam alayhi salam. Inna abakum wahid, inna rabbakum wahid, your Lord is one, your Father is one. Recognize that. So this is very important to understand that. And so, each one of us, we have to examine ourselves.
SubhanAllah, Dr. Siddiqui, what I'm hearing you say is your actions speak louder than your race, right? Allah's going to look at your actions. And also that, we have to look at racism on individual basis, as you said, hidden biases, right? And also systemic racism, and that is in the society. So alhamdulillah, today we are going to be looking at different aspects and angles of racism. The rest of the panel, I'm extremely humbled to have you guys here, and I'm going to go through and introduce each one of you before you go on. But mashallah, we have Imam Abdul Hafiz, we have brother Hussam Ailush, we have brother Shakil Sayyid. Jazakumullah khair, everybody, for being here today. So we're going to talk about racism, and let's go ahead and look at it from different angles. I'm going to introduce brother Imam Abdul Hafiz. Mashallah, he is the director of prison outreach and he's currently Imam for Masjid Sharif in Long Beach. He comes with a, mashallah, long resume, a little bit older than I am. But he was born and raised in Gary, Indiana. MashaAllah, he received his degree in American history from Tuskegee University in 1973. And then he embraced Islam in 1970 as an undergraduate student. And after further training overseas, mashallah, he joined the Federal Bureau of Prisons as one of its first Muslim staff chaplains in 1987. May Allah bless you. For over 2 decades, he continued to serve various federal prisons, and he retired as a supervisory chaplain in 2009. So it's an honor to have you, Imam Abdul Hafiz, and you're no stranger to being black in the American Muslim community. So can you shed some light on what that experience looks like, and then to help us understand that angle of it as we approach this issue and dissect it and look at it from different views, Imam Abdul Hafiz.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على ختم الأنبياء والمرسلين صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Truly, it's an honor to be in this gathering with my teacher, Dr. Muzammil Siddiqui, who with the first American-born imams were trained in 1978 in a program that was put together by the late Dr. Ahmed Sakr, who was the president at the time, may Allah have mercy upon his soul, of the Muslim World League. Scholars were brought from around the world to teach more than 130 American-born imams from across the United States. This is 2 years after the Nation of Islam had become Muslims. And so half of that, probably 50, were ministers like Minister Kareem Hassan, Siraj Wahaj was a part of that group, but Dr. Siddiqui taught us Sirah. And it was, may Allah bless him and his family and all of the great work in which he's done. And Brother Alush and all of the great work that he does in the taking care of our civil responsibilities, our civil duties, our civil protections with CARE organization. And enough can be said of our beautiful brother Shakil Saeed, who I've known for decades, supporting, going into the jails and the prisons when it wasn't popular with the youth, and being really instrumental in the Shura Council taking on the prison outreach program. As mentioned in my bio, I became Muslim in college, and I never had gone to prison or been in the prison or anything like that. And my exposure to Islam initially was from studying African history. Was the first introduction of Islam by a non-Muslim person. But it was enough where I investigated, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed me that there were 2 brothers. One was from Iran and one was from Pakistan that were engineering students that gave me Maududi's book, Towards Understanding Islam, that really motivated me to, or galvanized me to all the way want to go to embrace Islam. But on the day that I embraced Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought some African-American Muslims, Sunni Muslims, that I didn't even know that there was Sunni Muslims, African-Americans, all wearing thobes. They were from Washington, D.C. And so I came into Islam up under what was known as the Dar al-Islam, which was an absolute Sunni Muslim entity that only had been Sunni Muslims and never connected with the nation of Islam. And even myself, I didn't get into Malcolm X until after I became into Islam and then studied his writings and his sayings and those kinds of things. I say that just to give some background into my experience, because coming a Muslim on a campus at that time, it was 3 of us, and I ended up being pole vaulted to becoming the imam. Even though we had students from Nigeria and some other places, they didn't want to take the leadership or anything of that nature. So I took on that responsibility, and shortly thereafter, there were 30 to 40 more students that had become Muslim. And then I connected with now Dr. Ihsan Bagby, who at the time was just a young student himself. And so our experience in learning Islam was through each other, African Americans. But as I evolved and matured and grew, and we started seeing the difference in our immigrant brothers and sisters, and it hasn't been so much of an experience of racism from their perspective, but it has been that we're invisible. And this is how the African American community feels often, is that we're not seen. we're not appreciated as humans, and we didn't leave the racist reality of this society to become Muslims to be treated in that way. And we often hear, especially those who are in leadership positions, of how a brother or sister, especially our sisters, but I'll just give this one example. A brother's going to a masjid, and we know that the sunnah of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is to be shoulder to shoulder, foot to foot. And the brothers that say the more they try to put their foot, the other person is moving their feet further and further away. And this is an experience across the country that is expressed when they go, and they always feel that they're doing this because they don't want me to touch them. They don't want me next to them. And so for the learned of the leadership among the Muslims, they generally treat us fair. But it is the daughters and the sons, and we know that multitudes of Muslims who don't go to the masajids and observe the faith in a way that they should. But these are your nieces and your nephews and your sisters and your brothers. And so those listening, take this to them, that especially at Eid prayers, and when there's a function and the men are in a separate room, when our women go into a room, they're often in there alone. Nobody comes and sits beside them. When we get in the car to go home after 2 hours, and we look at our wives and they're in tears, or they express to us that how they were sitting alone, and we had no idea because we're in a separate room. And this is consistent and constant at all of the different functions. Even if we go to a wedding, oftentimes I may know 2 or 3 people, so I'm surrounded. But our women, they'll go and they'll always feel that they're alone. And so this is and it's not about the faith. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is clear. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is clear in word, clear in action. But it is we who must, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is blessing us with such an opportunity here in America. America is so unique and so different than so many other places where Islam has been. Brazil, South and Central America, slaves who Muslims were there just as long or before than they were here in the United States. But how Islam has evolved and is evolving here in the United States gives us this unique opportunity to truly let this faith blossom in a way that our children would really grow to learn to embrace their brothers and sisters who are different than themselves, who come from the descendants of slaves. I'm the descendant of a slave, of slaves. And my people were here for over 200 or 300 years that I have documented to go back to. And we love Islam. And this is why even in the jails and the prisons, for 30 years, I've been working in these places. And when people see me, they pat me on the shoulder and like, oh, you're doing a great job. But they don't give a nickel to assist. I don't need nothing, but to assist the work, to assist those who are coming home, who have left a life of being lost, a life of being rejected, a life of not being treated as a human being. And they embrace Islam in that environment. And they fall in love with Islam in that environment, even though they may go 10, 15 years and nobody comes to visit them. And Christians have 100 people a day coming in to visit the Christian inmates who embrace Christianity in there. But this doesn't hinder the brothers or the sisters. They love Allah, they love Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they don't become Muslims because they've heard anything on the radio. They haven't heard YouTube. They haven't heard some great scholar. They become Muslim when they just hear about the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when they understand what Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam received and what he implemented, this is what inspires them. This is what motivates them. This is what draws them. And all that they want and all that we want is for our community that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed those who come here from different lands, come here with nothing as students and become wealthy and become business. We're happy for your success. I hear all the time in Masjid al-Sharif, which is one of the oldest masjids in Southern California. Many of the Muslims who came here 30, 40 years ago, that was the first place they came. But when they moved out to Corona, they moved out to the other areas and they got their multi-million-dollar facilities, they don't come back anymore to support the efforts that we're striving to do in the inner city. This is what hurts. But again, we depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we want to be honest. And this is what's so beautiful about this moment, is that we can be honest with each other and we can speak so that we can be better. We can do better and we can make this land be the best that it can be. With our participation, we together can raise young men and young women with morals and with character and with the conduct that the non-Muslims who want them to lead because they have good character. This is what's needed. So we want to together do this. And again, I just, thank so much to be in this conversation, and that we as a community are open enough to hear from each other, to respect each other, but to, inshallah, get better in seeing me when you look at me, not looking through me or over me, but seeing me as the person in which I am, and the person in which those who are of a different shade of we are. We don't want nothing from this society other than to be treated equal. You can't imagine what it's like not to feel like a human being. The first time I felt like a human was when I did go to Saudi Arabia and study. When I left America for the first time and was outside of this land, was the first time that I felt like a human. Because in this society, my society didn't ever give me that. And this is all that, and this is what makes Islam so appealing inside of the jails and the prisons, because this is what it offers. It offers them to be human. It offers them with hope, and it offers them with guidance and direction, and a merciful God, and a prophet who was merciful, and a community that is merciful. We know our community is merciful. We know how they respond to the pains in Pakistan and the pains in China and the pains in Afghanistan, but we're just saying, look at our pain. Help us with our pain here. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you, Jazakallah khair, Imam Abdul Hafiz. You bring a very interesting perspective. So one thing you mentioned, and I am one of those people. I came to this country to go to college and to study computer science, and so I'm wondering if that's where the disconnect is. I'm wondering if, I'm looking at myself, right? I'm going to be vulnerable and admit it, right? Maybe I'm not aware, and maybe others who come here as doctors and engineers and really reap the fruits, right, of their hard work, of their education. Maybe they're not aware of the struggles of the Black community in America, and it might be easy for us to fall into the trap of saying, okay, just stay out of trouble. So no, I'm gonna go back to Brother Hussam, to you, and tell me what's wrong with that mentality. I could be thinking, all right, just don't do anything wrong. You'll be fine. What's wrong with me thinking like that as an immigrant, having arrived and went straight to work with a college degree? It seems simple to me, and just being the devil's advocate here. So, Brother Hussam Ayloush, if you can help us with that angle of the conversation.
Yes, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam. So thank you for being here, Brother Hussam.
Of course,
I'm not.
No, you're already.
My mom is very mad at me right now.
You already welcomed us, Brother Hassan.
Thank you. I also want to welcome our ASL interpreters. We have a brother and a sister that helping do American Sign Language. Thank you guys for being here. We're very grateful. Sorry for interruption, Brother Hussam. Go ahead.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, and may Allah's peace and blessings be upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, and upon his family and companions and all the followers. First of all, I want to say Alhamdulillah for Islam. Indeed, all praises are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the ni'mah of Islam that brings us together. Look how diverse we are, and yet, alhamdulillah, our hearts, I have no doubt, are as attached, as tied up together as they can be, as true brothers are. Alhamdulillah ta'ala. And I want to say thank you for the opportunity to be with my teachers here, truly my mentors and teachers here. I'm not exaggerating. Each one of them here has been and has continued to make a difference in guiding me and directing me, alhamdulillah, and I'm blessed, feel blessed to be among them here, mashallah. And I want to really thank in specific Imam Abdul Hafiz for being vulnerable, being honest, because I think the community needs to hear that. We need to hear about how, I can't talk about this issue unless I felt it, and no one can feel it except the person enduring it and dealing with it. And I want to put a few things in perspective, and I want to clarify a few things. First thing I want to say, as a person who has visited, alhamdulillah, part of my job, I get to visit a lot of the masajid. Pakistani masajid, Arab masajid, black masjids, Latinos, mixed ones, you name it, young ones, old ones, students. Alhamdulillah, we have all of this, and I look for the day that we don't have to identify a masjid that way or this way. But the reality, it happens. Sometimes a masjid is built where a community is. It happens to be an African-American neighborhood. It could be a Latino neighborhood. It could be recent immigrants from Somalia neighborhood. And it's okay, alhamdulillah. Actually, as Sheikh Muzammil said earlier, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, right? وَجَعَلَكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلًا لِتَعَارَفُوا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made you, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلًا لِتَعَارَفُوا. Allah says, I've made you into nations and tribes so you may engage with one another, know one another. So alhamdulillah, it's a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a deliberate act that Allah made us different, so we can appreciate. I want to say that from my experience, and I've been doing this for over 32 years now, I haven't seen, with the exception of few cases here and there, I haven't seen overt racism in the Muslim community for the large part. Alhamdulillah ta'ala, this is the blessing of Islam. But I've seen a lot of casual racism, meaning people like Imam Abdul Hafid was talking about, where people think maybe that, I'm a little bit, I feel more comfortable with my people. I love everybody, but hey, God forbid my daughter or my son marries somebody outside of my area, outside of my race. Things like that. And when you sit down with them and say, why would you say that? They don't usually use racist language. They don't say, oh, because they're inferior to me. Usually say, well, I'd rather be with my culture. This is casual racism that is equally bad, because what it does, it creates a climate in which, institutional and structural racism thrives and then leads to hatred, leads to discrimination. So we have to deal with the issue at the root cause. And why does it exist? And I don't want to belittle or undermine what Sheikh Abdul Hafid said. Imam, also that happens. I sit with Latino Muslims. They tell me the same thing. They go to, my wife is Mexican-American Muslim, right? We'll go to the masjid. I happen to know everybody. And I've talked to my wife, nobody talked to me maybe. I have to go out of my way to talk. But I have to say that if I go and visit, if I go with my Arab friends and visit mostly Bangladeshi masjid, sometimes that happens. And I have no doubt some of my Desi brothers and sisters, if they come to a heavily Arab masjid, they feel that way. We have a problem. We are not engaging. We're still allowing some tribalism. Again, I'm not putting it in hatred. In social behavior, casual, still bad. We need to address it. Alhamdulillah ta'ala, Islam teaches us. Why does racism happen? There's the arrogance that Sheikh Muzammil talked about. And this is, the first sin that happened since the creation of Adam was this kibr, this arrogance. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam and asked the angels, bow for this creation that I've created. All of them in respect, in dignifying that and honoring that creation of Adam. A human being, a creation that can choose right from wrong. A creation that will be held accountable. This is subhanAllah, the masterpiece that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose. Everybody agreed except the leader of the jinn, right? One of the leaders of the jinn, Iblis, alayhi la'antullah, may Allah curse Satan. What was his sin? He said, أَنَا خَيْرٌ مِّنْهُ خَلَقْتَنِي مِنْ نَارٍ وَخَلَقْتَهُ مِنْ طِينٍ. He said, I am better than him. SubhanAllah. The first sin is racism. He said, I am better than Adam, better than this creation, because you created me from what? From fire. But you created him from clean, mud, you want to call it. Mud. I can't be with him. He probably, if he had to stand up next to us, he probably would have kept his feet away, thinking he's better somehow. SubhanAllah. So that is one side. The other one is, the other reason why there is racism is ignorance. The more ignorant we are about our beautiful religion, the more tribal, the more racist, the more bigoted, the more prejudiced we become. The more ignorant. The closer we come, the more we allow Islam to load fully into our life, into our heart. SubhanAllah. Truly, if there is a nation that doesn't see color, it should be the nation of Muslims, the Ummah of Islam. It should be. Alhamdulillah, if we follow Islam correctly, it will be that way. But we're human beings. Muslims are human beings at the end of the day. We have flaws that other human beings have. But we can defeat these flaws the closer we come to the teaching of Islam. Other reasons is asabiyya, tribalism. That's the leftovers of jahiliyyah. Asabiyya, that says, and the Prophet ﷺ said, Laysa minna. He said, he is not one of us who calls for jahiliyyah or who dies on jahiliyyah, on asabiyya. He's not one of us who calls for asabiyya, tribalism. It's not, Islam and asabiyya never come close. They cannot be together. The other reason is, some of it is the leftover of colonialism. Many of the Muslims who come here have been in countries that have been ruled by colonialists. Colonialists who planted in our heads, or the heads of our forefathers, that the lighter your skin is, the better you are. And people somehow look up when they don't have a strong foundation. You know, there are scholars who, one of the great scholars is Islamic thinkers, Malik bin Nabi, rahimahullah, from Algeria. He said the defeat is not a military defeat. You know, because you lose a battle, you can win the other battle. The defeat is when you lose psychologically or emotionally. When the colonialists defeat you intellectually. And that's what happened with a lot of Muslims who were ruled by the British and the French. They were told, the closer you look like the colonialists, the better you are. That's why they're afraid to have their skin dark. You have in some Muslim places, people, they put cream on their bodies so they can become lighter skin. People who are ashamed, they tell their kids, stay away from the sun. And this is not about blacks or brown, this is about sick mind that exists in our mind. And to defeat colonialists is not just to remove the rule, but also to remove that cultural weakness that we have. And I will conclude with examples of how the Prophet ﷺ helped the Arabs, the early Arabs, you know, the Arabs who are the earliest Muslims. Islam is a universal religion, but it came initially within the Arab surrounding. And it had to succeed there in order for the rest of us who might not be originally Arab to learn about it. So how did Islam defeat racism among the Arabs? And by the way, the Arabs were very racist before Islam. You know, that's why some of them carry it over. When Islam has not taken in fully, they keep carrying it. But alhamdulillah, when Islam came in, and the Prophet taught us that. And the best example is, and I don't want to even go over the many other examples, but how the story of Bilal, may Allah be pleased with him. Bilal, one of the greatest companions of the Prophet. Think about the story, two stories. When another great Sahabi, Abu Dharr al-Ghafari, may Allah be pleased with him, had a confrontation. Him and Bilal, may Allah be pleased with both of them, had an argument. It got heated a little bit. And Abu Dharr at the end, he said, Yabna Sawda, right? He said, oh, you, the son of this black mother. You're the son of the black mother. It hurt Bilal. Of course it would. And he went to the Prophet, his beloved friend, the Prophet Muhammad. He said, oh, Messenger of Allah, this and this happened between me and my brother. And the Prophet fumed when he heard that. He said, call Abu Dharr for me. And Abu Dharr came. And he said, did this happen? Abu Dharr said, yes. And he apologized. He said, I don't know what happened to me. He said, yeah, Abu Dharr, you are a person who still has some of Jahiliyyah, ignorance in you before Islam, the ignorance of before Islam. Abu Dharr felt so bad. He wanted to apologize. You know what he did? He insisted on putting his head on the sand, the hot sand of the desert. Subhanallah. He insisted on putting his head, and he swore, he said, by Allah, I will not remove my head from the sand until, oh Bilal, you put your foot on my cheek. Bilal said, no, I don't want to do that. Khalas, I forgive you. He said, no, I swore by Allah, I would not move until you put your foot, because I want to defeat whatever is left from that ignorance, Jahiliyyah in me. And Bilal, just to accommodate him, put his foot quickly and removed it, and they hugged each other, and mashallah became among the closest of the Sahaba. This is one story, how the Sahaba, how we as Muslims should make sure we remove that ego that exists, or whatever it is. Another story is when the Prophet ﷺ came back to Mecca, the Fatih Mecca, after being pushed away out of Mecca and persecuted and all of that. And he went back, he arrived, alhamdulillah, as a victor at that moment. And he came to the most holiest of places for Muslims and the Arabs before Islam even, Kaaba, right? Think about the Kaaba. And he went there to do 2 rak'ahs there. And he asked for the keys of Kaaba, and he was given the keys of the Kaaba. And he wanted to go inside the Kaaba. Now think about that. The Prophet ﷺ wanted to take one person with him. Some stories, some narrations say 2. And he said, and now if I ask you today, who would you think he would ask? Probably Abu Bakr, maybe Umar, maybe Uthman, maybe Ali. May Allah be pleased with them all. Great Sahabas, great choices. But he chose Bilal. And he asked Bilal, and another story, it was Bilal and Usama ibn Zayd. Both, blacks. One is a former black slave, Bilal, may Allah be pleased with him, and Usama, the son of a former slave. And he's black too, the son of Ayman, the nanny, the one who took care of the Prophet. And he went inside the Kaaba, the holiest of the place for the Arabs, subhanAllah. And they prayed together and they left. And it was Dhuhr time, and he asked Bilal to make the adhan. He said, Bilal, make the adhan for Dhuhr. And I will finish, inshallah, Hassan. He said, make the adhan. And what did he ask him? Where did he ask him to make the adhan? Not near the Kaaba. He said, Bilal, get on top of the Kaaba. Now imagine the people of Quraysh who are not yet Muslims yet, were sitting around, because that's where their stores are and their meeting places are. They're sitting around the Kaaba and they're looking. The one they hated, the one they tortured before, is getting on with his bare feet, blessed bare feet, may Allah bless him, and stood on top of the Kaaba and made the adhan. Why did the Prophet ask him to do that? This was part of the lesson, because the Prophet wanted the early Muslims to get the message. We are brothers. What elevates us is what Sheikh Muzammil said, is what, quoting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Inna akramakum inda Allahi atqakum. The most noble in the sight of Allah is the one who is most pious, the one who has most mindfulness and righteousness towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So my dear brothers and sisters, yes, the problem exists, but we can defeat it. Alhamdulillah ta'ala, the ummah is in good shape. Alhamdulillah, wallahi, the best brotherhood in humanity that I've seen in my life is in the Muslim ummah, alhamdulillah. It was before, and it continues to be. Al-khayru fiyya wa fi ummati ila yawm ad-din. But we should not, even if there's one case, and there are more than one case, we have to defeat it, but we can only defeat it together, inshallah. May Allah bring our hearts together and allow us, inshallah, to rid our ummah of this disease.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Hussam. And you could tell when I'm getting antsy and look at my timer. So I appreciate your diligence there.
Always a tough time. Tough time for you. May Allah give you barakah in what you're doing.
I mean, thank you, everybody. So I want to remind our brothers and sisters in the audience that are listening to us, if you have a question, please go ahead and post it in the Q&A panel. If you're in Zoom, you can post it directly. You can post it on Facebook, and then it will get to me, inshallah. So if you have questions, go ahead and ask. So Brother Hussam, you talked about, this old world, that maybe there's some asabiyya or jahiliyyah, but, for sure not today. So I want to bring in Brother Shakil Sayyid. He's a current board member of the American Muslims for Palestine. He's a board member of the ACLU. He gets arrested a lot for some reason. And then he's a former director of the Shura Council and a dear brother of mine. So Brother Shakil Sayyid, we listen to Hussam. Our deen does not, racism and Islam do not go together, but we see it. And I said, this is going to be an honest conversation. I'm not going to shy away from it. So I'm going to come out and say it. Why do we have racism? Why, especially in the immigrant community? Where is that coming from, Brother Shakil?
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
A pleasure and honor to be with all of you for this much needed and timely, difficult conversation for all of us. As is generally said, that everything that I wanted to say is already said, but not everyone has said it. So I might respectfully submit some concerns. What Imam Abdul Hafiz has shared is the reality today, and what Dr. Siddiqui and Brother Hussam has mentioned is the ideal that we all believe in and we are blessed with as a divine gift to all of us. So undoubtedly we all know that Islam is not racist, but some of the followers of Islam may not necessarily be anti-racist. And I think there's no generalization, but we must not live in a denial that among us there are Muslims, practicing Muslims, observant Muslims, who practice racism knowingly or unknowingly. Muslims are not racist, arguably, but racism does exist in our community. And that is expressed in a variety of ways, sometimes implicitly and sometimes explicitly. And I will give some examples in that regard, which are based on personal life experiences and observations. But then also I will share some data that is produced by Institute of Social Policy Understanding, ISPU, in collaboration with Muslim Anti-Racism Collaborative, that is done some years ago, in fact, 2015. And this is concrete data of over 1,000 Muslims across the country of different ages and different backgrounds. That is to show that it is not a myth that racism does not exist in Muslim community. It does exist. We have to acknowledge it, as painful, as difficult as it may be, but we must. One can argue that we are less racist than someone else, but there is racism that does exist in the community. So I'll give you some examples that I just jotted down based on our experiences, and I'm sure many of us may have heard this, have seen this. So those of us who are of South Asian descent, such as myself, I have heard in number of settings by different people, highly educated, practicing, observant Muslims, when they refer to our African American brothers, the terms that are used, Kala, Habashi, Kalu, these are actual terms. These are not created by me or someone, but these are often used terms in the Arab community, brothers and sisters. Abid is the word that is often used. Not often, but it is used to attribute that to an African American person. We see overt and explicit racism when it comes to parents looking for a match for their children. Some of our Muslim magazines and ethnic newspapers have in fact were condemned by many people in the community to stop advertising those advertisements, whereby a parent asks the community to look for or to propose a fair-skinned female or a fair-skinned male for their children. It cannot be more overt racism than this. Other examples that comes to mind that we often hear in our Islamic schools, where children of African American descent or Latino descent, or sometimes even Caucasian descent who are converts, by our children, our meaning South Asian and Arab American, bullying their children, calling names, and obviously they are learning from environment and also perhaps from home. We see when Brother Abdul Hafiz had mentioned the prison outreach program that under the leadership of Dr. Siddiqui and Imam Abdul Hafiz, we started at Shura Council some years ago. There were several well-known, respected, practicing, observant Muslims, some in the leadership position, some not, asked and insisted that it is a waste of time and resource. Why are we supporting, why are we investing our time and resources to, quote unquote, these black criminals? Cannot be more racist than that. Then we see the allocation of resources in our masajid, in our organizations at local level, regional level, and national level. Particularly if we look at the relief agencies in the United States, we collect by the account of the relief agencies themselves a little over $250 million, $250 million US for humanitarian purposes. Some of them are designated for certain areas and issues, and some are general funding. I have not seen as many requests or call to action by these relief agencies for the plight of the poor, working class, African American and Latino Muslim community members in the United States. as opposed to rightfully so, perhaps also, but because that's needed. The emphasis that we place as a collective on the painful plight of people overseas, whether it's Palestine, Kashmir, China, and Syria, and Yemen, and so many other places. What Imam Abdul Hafiz is referring to, when my neighbor, who happens to be a Muslim and who happens to be an African American brother or a sister, who is suffering with variety of challenges, housing, employment, poverty, racism, discrimination, and so on. And my zakat and my sadaqah is being allocated somewhere else and not here. It's a problem. It's a challenge. It directly impacts the psyche of the people who are impacted by this implicit and explicit racism. One of our leaders, one of our supposedly leaders at the national level, 4 or 5 years ago, in a major conference, stands up and says, and I quote, "US in its laws is one of the least racist in the world." I'm not making this up. Highly celebrated Muslim scholar / leader. In the audience, thousands of African American Muslim brothers and sisters and Latinos sitting in the audience. Uproar in the cyberspace against this expression. Candid, casual, what Hussam is referring to, because the minds are so conditioned through colonization that we don't even realize and recognize that we are saying something that hurts people and that is in principle also wrong. And this filters down in the community in variety of ways. So I think these are real practical challenges and real issues. And I think the first step that we must take, without hesitation, without any conditions and qualifications, that there is racism in our community, period. And then we find solutions to that. There are many solutions, possible solutions at individual level, at family level, at community level. They can be addressed. And certainly not all Muslims are racist. And Islam is not racist, but racism does exist. I think that is an explicit acknowledgement and recognition that we must undertake. In my conversations with many of friends and my family, people of my age and a little older, I often hear that racism does not exist. So I'll share some of these screens if possible. But Hassan, if I have a few minutes, or how much time do I have?
You got a couple more minutes. I don't know if you can do screen share, Ibrahim.
I see. So I think, yeah, I'm disabled, so I'm sorry. So I'll share the data with you.
Just go ahead. Yes.
On my screen. So this is done by ISPU and Muslim Arc in 2015, and this data suggests as follows. So discrimination from Muslims by age toward African American folks: 46% among the young people 18 to 24, 58% for ages between 25 and 32, 66% between ages 32 and 50, and those who are older, 50 plus, my age group, 83% of the people have discriminated against African American brothers. By ethnicity, what Hussam was referring to, that African American folks are not the only ones. People from North Africa, from Libya and Morocco and Algeria and other places, or from the East Asian, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, and so on. 22% from East Asia. African American, 79%. And this is by the ethnic group, right? You have white European American, 62%. And there are a few others, but for the interest of time, I'll skip. discrimination by ethnic group by Muslims. So from within the Muslim community, who we are discriminating certain ethnic groups. African American and the Latino community are over 80%, both of them, with a minor degree of variation. Now, discrimination of African American folks as a collective by Muslims of all ages and all ethnicities toward African American folks, 59%. 59% of Muslims discriminate against African American folks. 41% does not. Now, there is a parallel number also, discrimination of African American community by the society at large. 82% discriminates African American, 18%. So if I compare myself of our community with the society at large, yes, there is a difference of about 20 points. But is 60% discrimination by Muslims toward African American acceptable? This is a question that we must be asking ourselves as honestly, as sincerely, and as aggressively at this point in time as possible. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Jazakallah khair, brother Shakil. Really, really interesting perspective. It's interesting that language has a lot to do with it. So let's cover some of the and the language that we use, right? Because it shows what's in your heart. So let's cover some of the questions that we got. Imam Abdul Hafiz, I'm going to go to you first. The question that we have from the audience is, as being Muslim for so long, do you still feel alienated by the rest, and this is how they have it, by the rest of the Muslim community, meaning non-Black? Is there still that awkwardness that you talked about in your introduction?
No. Alhamdulillah, there's been so much growth, and because, there's been interaction and engagement in so many different ways, so things have definitely, evolved, and they continue to evolve. And this is what's so beautiful about this opportunity, this moment, is that, we know we'll never be perfect on this earth, but we have to strive to be better today than we were yesterday. And so in that light, and the beautiful thing about this faith is that, we're a work in progress. And so it is getting better, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, that's really good to hear. For the next question, I'm just going to put it up to the panel, and you guys let me know who wants to take that one. For our leaders, why do you think there's still so much disconnect between immigrant, quote unquote, masjids and African American masajids in the inner cities? Why is there so much disconnect in between the institutions across racial lines? Anybody wants to tackle that one?
I'm not justifying. I think there's a lot of shortcomings, and people have to correct themselves. So we all have to look into ourselves and correct what our centers are doing. And we have more collaboration, more cooperation between the Afro-American community and the immigrant community. But I think a lot of things is that people are not immigrants, especially the recent immigrants. They're not very aware of the culture. They're afraid of going out of their way, try to be in the more familiar area, more familiar ground. And that is the thing is, so that's what they do that. So they cling to each other. And Afghans are connecting with each other, Somalis are with themselves, Vietnamese and Cambodians with themselves, Indo-Pakistanis are with themselves, Arab with themselves. So all of this is that's what it is. I mean, our masajid should not be ethnic masajid. Ideally, masajid should be non-ethnic, should be all everybody, but they are, that's the way it is that they are. So it is because you are in their own group and then you are comfortable with that, and now you don't want to go outside and meet with others. But I think what is happening these 2 weeks, it is eye-opening. It will be a good dialogue, although it's coming because of the very unfortunate event that happened. The way the person was killed is terrible, brutal. But the dialogue is important. The dialogue is happening, and everybody is realizing themselves. The whole country is in dialogue and thinking about themselves what to do. So I hope it should bring a change in all our behavior. we as Muslims, immigrants as well as Afro-American, we should go out of way to have more and more collaboration with each other, visit each other's masajid, and bring people to our homes and visit them and see that. So I think this is there. It's happening here and there, but it's not something that we really do it more consciously. I think we should become more conscious.
Sorry to interrupt. I just feel like we have to be more conscious, more purpose-driven in our outreach, not just keep it haphazard if it happens, if it's convenient. This is, I see this interaction and the continuation of this dialogue as essential to our survival as a community, to reach out and be together. The next question, so Brother Hussam, I got a couple of questions about the Arab community, and I'm going to try to summarize both of them and kind of add my own language, right? So what's the messaging? How do we tell our Arab parents to use the correct term for black when we speak? Because language is important. Instead of using a derogatory term like abid or which means slave, and it's actually not like a slave of Allah, it's actually meant in a derogatory way. How would you go about advising Arab parents? I got two questions that are exactly the same sentiment. So how would you go about changing that attitude, Brother Hussam?
Sure, I'm going to take maybe half a minute to build up on what Sheikh Muzammil said about the other question.
You have 2 minutes. You can do whatever you want.
I don't want us to be too hard on ourselves. I want us to look at the positive. There are few things that are happening just by history. Immigrants came to one area, they built one mosque. Alhamdulillah, things will change automatically because intermarrying, we're getting to know each other. Whoever was in the comfort zone with the Afghans, with the Lebanese, eventually they're going to move out and they meet with each other. What we have to do is speed up, create a catalyst to speed up that integration effort. Alhamdulillah, we get to know each other. We have to point the fingers at those who say something wrong, people who promote racism. We have to be, and that's back to your question now. Whether it's Arabs or Pakistanis or Indians or blacks or anyone who uses a term that's derogatory, we have to get out of our comfort zone. We can't go and say, well, it's none of my business. It is my business. What is happening
anymore? Yeah,
it's never okay, and it's definitely not okay now, because if there's one community that can lead the effort against racism in this country and in the world, is the Muslim community. I just had my kids, as a family, watch Malcolm X, the movie again last night. Actually, very long movie. It's my 5th time maybe watching it. I usually try not to because it has some violence. Still young, but I wanted them to watch it. But the message that they came back with is the message that he sent from his pilgrimage to Mecca, rahmatullah alayhi. One of the martyr of Islam in America. He said, if America is to deal with racism, it needs to discover Islam. And shame on us as Muslims. Shame on us if we still allow or remain silent in face of racism. Wallahi, if one person is not acceptable, let alone any percentage. So the way to do it is, again, we don't want to beat up somebody, we don't want to beat up our parents, but we hear something wrong, bil ma'roof, remind them, say, what, Baba, you teach us Islam. You teach us that Islam says we're brothers and sisters. That is not right. لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب نفسه. One of you is not a true believer until he loves or she loves for the brother and what they love for themselves. Would you like for anybody to talk to us or talk about us this way? And they would say, and then what you taught us, you should follow it. Basically, challenge each other. Challenge each other to do more than what we're doing. Invite imams. Alhamdulillah, many masajid do that. So we can have imams rotate around the masajid. Invite each other to weddings. Invite each other to picnics. It's got to take basic things. By the way, the young people are doing much better than we are. You go to colleges, the #1 book read in college is the autobiography of Malcolm X. Probably he's the hero of every young person, Muslim and otherwise. Young people in America are doing much better. Let's follow their footsteps and let's take action from our end, inshallah, to break these barriers that we inherited from Jahiliyyah or from colonialism or whatever the reason it might be, because there is no excuse whatsoever. We have to defeat what African Americans, brothers and sisters, are dealing with today is not their problem. It is our problem. We have to defeat it because we know those who are racist against blacks are racist against Latinos, are racist against Muslims, against Jews, against everybody else. And if anything, we owe African Americans, wallahi, every right we celebrate in America today, especially immigrants for us. Wallahi, it came on the back and the sacrifices of these brothers and sisters of ours over the last 500 years. And shame on us if we're not there, not with them, wallahi, ahead of them. Taking whatever heats they take, we should take it first, at least as a paying back of the debt that they've paid for us over the last 500 years. May Allah bless them and may Allah protect them.
MashaAllah, that's a really good point you made, right? A lot of what we have achieved as a community in terms of civil rights has really come back on the backs of those who drove and carried the civil rights movement. So, I see you're in the CARE conference room. I don't know if that's the background.
Background.
As a background. All right. I was going to say, may Allah have
full disclosure
for working so hard.
Well, you're working too. Everybody's working hard tonight, mashallah.
Hey, you fooled me. So anyway, so as somebody who works in civil rights, right? Do you believe the justice system, the so-called justice system, and law enforcement are more cruel and harsh to blacks in our society, or is just the way things are? Like, can you shed some light on that side of it?
There is absolutely no doubt on earth that the criminal or the injustice system we have here, let's not call it justice system, is selectively harsh, cruel on African Americans in this country. I'm not saying an opinion. There are studies, whether we look at charging rates, police brutality, people serving terms. There's, studies and statistics show that for a fact. There's no debate about that issue. The problem is within our community, we hear sometimes people repeating Fox News nonsense. Especially if I hear one more time somebody telling me all lives matter, I'm gonna fume, I'm gonna bore. Of course, all lives matter. We know that. But at this point, there's one life that is not regarded with respect. There's one life that is being targeted, and that is the life of black people in America. And until that life is safe, and until that life matters, then none of our lives matter. So it is not. Let's not play games. Yes, the reality is they are receiving the brunt of our injustice in this country because of, again, the many reasons. I'm not going to go over them now. Because of the casual racism we talked about, because the built-in racism that exists in the system, because of the injustices of marginalization that happened over the years. Because somebody can say, well, more minorities commit crimes. Well, if you marginalize a certain people for 500 years, deny them rights, education, economy, opportunities, then what are you going to get? Of course, you're going to get angry young people. If you're not giving them an opportunity to go to college, they're going to join some gang, some group, whether they're Arab, white, black, brown, I don't care what they are. If you take people, their basic human rights, their basic dignity, they're going to fight back, human nature. So whatever people use, even when they use these studies in the cut and paste type of, to try to make an argument, even that, without the context of what is happening, we cannot tell the full story of the abuse that exists in our country today.
So yeah, just for the sake of time, Brother Shakil, your involvement with the ACLU, how do you see the criminal justice system and how it treats blacks in America? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so I'll give an answer in a different way rather than a direct way about ACLU. We as educated, thoughtful people in this country must recognize the system of capitalism cannot exist and function in its way that we see now today in absence of racism. What we have today is a plantation capitalism. The very system cannot function and exist if there is no enemy internally. And so the criminal justice system is in fact criminal injustice system. There are millions of examples, systematic, structural, where people of color in general, African American folks in particular, are completely under the yoke of the system that exists here, which keeps them, as was popularly said at the memorial, on the necks of the blacks. And that's why organizations like ACLU exists, to fight and to defend the rights of all minorities and marginalized people, and particularly African Americans. So I think some of us Muslim, pardon me to
No, you're
extend
fine.
this, I would remind Muslim community, ourselves, to not applaud and appease and not stand with the law enforcement agencies and bring them into our masajid to celebrate their work as early as at the a week, less than a week ago, when the local sheriff, Los Angeles County Sheriff, under whose watch 601 innocent African American people are killed, are murdered in Los Angeles County in last year in 2019, not one police officer was charged for that crime. A South Asian Muslim leader of an organization whose name I prefer not to take stands with the Sheriff Alex Villanova, attends a press conference, and condemns the reaction of the protest on the street of Los Angeles without uttering one word about the structural racism and the police brutality and unconditional immunity of police people in this country. How do I think would that land on the hearts and minds of the African American brothers and sisters? Yeah. There is racism that exists in our community. We must acknowledge it. We must condemn it, regardless of where it comes from. Unless we do that, rest of the ideals that we talk about and refer to, from Bilal Raziallahu anh to Malcolm X, is theory. I, for one, as a Muslim, as a South Asian Muslim, I hereby declare that I have implicit racism embedded in my psyche, and I promise and I pledge to undo that intentionally and consciously. That needs to be done at individual level and collective level.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. I join you in that pledge and that recognition. And inshallah, we'll do my best both on individually and organizationally. So, subhanAllah, this has been kind of, eye-opening discussion. I think we all need to keep looking in the mirror. Let's not break the mirror after this conversation. Let's keep looking in the mirror, because when thinking about the mirror, and I was reminding myself and another brother about this, is the mirror never lies to you. When you look in the mirror and you have gray hair like I do, it shows you every single one of them. Yes. So, or no hair. I guess I should be grateful. Then the mirror is not lying to you. And I think let's not break this mirror. Let's keep looking in the mirror, examine ourselves, and really learn from, what you said about so many people dying, and then having a Muslim leader stand by, ahead of an organization that's responsible for that death. We need to learn from these moments, and inshallah, I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is a turning point in our thinking, in our how we show up with our brothers and sisters who are blacks, and how we show up for each other, and how we support each other. I want to thank all of you for being here. I'm going to transition to Dr. Muzammil Siddiqui to help make dua for guidance and for unity and for better days ahead, inshallah. I want to thank the brother and sister who are doing the interpretation. I want to thank our admin staff, the volunteers. They're filtering questions to me and helping with the infrastructure. May Allah reward everybody who's working behind the scenes. Dr. Muzammil Siddiqui, if you can take us out with the dua. Jazakallah khair.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. اللهم آت نفوسنا تقواها وزكها فأنت خير من زكاها أنت وليها ومولاها. O Allah, give our souls the piety and purify our hearts and keep us on the right path. O Allah, bring us together, forgive our mistakes, our shortcomings, and help us to work with each other. Become the people who care for others, care for all people, especially our own brothers and sisters from the Afro-American community. May Allah bring our hearts together. And whatever mistakes we have done in the past, forgive us. Help us to improve ourselves and correct ourselves. Allah, to remove the difficulties and the pain that people are facing because of the suffering and difficulties here and anywhere else, all over. Because there is so much discrimination, there is so much hate, there is so much violence, there is so much discrimination problems that are there in the world. Whether it is Palestinians or the Kashmiris or the Rohingyans or the Chinese Muslims or the Indian Muslims, the Kashmir, all over. And here, now we see that it's in this great country that we talk so much about that, but here we see that. Guide us, guide the humanity to the right path. Oh Allah. Yes, us.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you everybody for being here. May Allah keep you and protect you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah.